And welcome to another episode of Patriots Fourth and Two. I'm your host, as always, Derek Havens. Joining me, Steve Balistrieri and Russ Goldman. We got the whole crew back together. We are all PatsFans.com bloggers. Today's episode, we're going to talk about the Patriots' new additions to their coaching staff with the coordinators. Before we start off anything, please do subscribe to us on our Patriots Fourth and Two YouTube account. If you could like, share, or leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast, it keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. Before we do anything, as always, Steve, what's up, man? How you doing?
It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood. We get to talk about football.
Actual football. No.
Yeah, football stuff for the Patriots, and it's all good news, I think. So
good.
We'll get into it.
Russ, it's so good to have you on always. I'm excited to do the show, the three of us. How's everything going with you?
Everything's going good, Derek. I'm happy to come on, talk about the coordinators and talk about what's going on. I actually, and just my thoughts, I like both of the moves of the coordinators. I also like the head coach. So this might be different than what's being watched right now on Boston Sports Radio. Or listen to. I think it's going to be a different type of show, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's start off with this before we even do anything. Steve and I had our own show, our last episode, talking about Mike Vrabel. Before we even jump into the coordinators, I'd love to get your 2 cents on basically your thoughts on Mike Vrabel being the head coach and the firing of Gerard Mayo. I just want to get you caught up on everything. So the floor is yours.
Sure. So I was all for the firing of Gerard Mayo. In fact, I had a tweet that kind of went viral talking about it, that I thought it was time, and it kind of went next level, which I never thought it would. So I was on board because I just had a feeling at this point it was time to move on. It wasn't the right fit. You got to admit it wrong, and I'm glad that the Kraft family have admitted that wrong and moved on from it.
Sure.
So in regards to bringing in Mayo, and I've talked to Steve about this. Bringing in Mike Vrabel, he was not my first choice. My first choice didn't even get interviewed. And I think part of it is obviously because of the playoffs, is I wanted them to interview Brian Flores. That was the man I actually thought would be the best fit for the Patriots moving forward.
Can you pause real quick? And I just want just because some people have asked me about that, and just so people don't know, the reason that Ben Johnson could interview virtually with the Patriots when they were going through that process, is because that the Lions had to bye.
Correct.
So according to NFL rules, it had to be virtual, and he could do it. Because the Vikings had to play that weekend, Flores could not interview. So just so people know, and I have no idea if they were interested or not. The timing didn't line up. But I just wanted to go ahead and say that because I think some people were confused of why that maybe he would be or not interviewed or whatever. The reason is the NFL. It's the NFL's rules. So
okay, very good there, Derek, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. And like I said, he didn't even get the opportunity, and we don't know if he was even on their radar. So they went to Mike Vrabel. And to be honest with you, out of the candidates, with the two that have been talked about the most, I wanted Vrabel because I know what Mike Vrabel would do if he got here. He was going to build a program once again. Now, I never thought, and I don't think it's going to be the same as Belichick. I think it's going to be different, but he will have a structure. There will be an identity that I think was missing all last season. So for me, this is a wonderful hire. And I'm actually really looking forward to seeing the Patriots build up again, because I think the rebuild actually begins now. I wanted it 2 years ago, but I think it's now, Derek. You and I talked about the build, this huge rebuild. And
the rebuild's been going on for 5 years. They've just done it really shitty. Unfortunately, sorry, Miguel. So it's just been really, really poorly kind of executed. There was different relationships and egos and that whole thing. But yeah, no, it's going to be a totally fresh start. So Steve, if I shift gears to you and we talk about Vrabel, we talked about some of the ideas of the coordinators that we were going to be bringing in, as he is kind of laying the floor for the staff. Before we even talk about, we'll talk about specifically each phase of the game coordinator-wise. Before we even get to that point, what's your general first take from the moves that have been made since he was announced as the Patriots head coach?
Oh, I like all of these moves because one, we talked about Josh McDaniels and his staying power now, so he's not going anywhere. Williams we'll get into in just a few moments, but
Sure.
Williams worked with him for 6 years with the Titans, and Vrabel thought enough of him to make him the assistant head coach. He gave him that title. So, I'm all on board with that as well. And third, I was so glad they kept Jeremy Springer because, I thought he did a really good job last year. And
Yep.
They didn't have a lot of successful times during the season, but when Springer was his guys were on the field, I thought they improved quite a bit over the year before.
Russ, any thoughts that you want to go ahead and add to what Steve shared?
Sure. So I agree with Steve on the special teams coordinator. I think that is a no-brainer. I'm glad that has stayed in-house. We'll just say it. And we're going to talk about both of these coordinators, but I just want to just add this to the table while we talk about both of the hires. There's been a lot of talk about these hires, especially we're going to talk about McDaniels, not being a Mike Vrabel decision. And I'm going to say this now on Patriots 4th and 2. I believe all of these decisions were Vrabel's decision. And
I know it for pretty much certainty. I can tell you that right now.
Well, good. So. Because there are fans out there that are doubting it because there happens to be a lot of people in the media that are saying that it was a Kraft decision. And this was a Vrabel decision. And the reason why I feel very strongly about this, and Derek, I know you're going to agree with me on this, there's no way that Mike Vrabel took the job without that kind of certainty that he would have the final say on his coaching staff. I think he's going to have final say on more than that as well. So for me, these are Vrabel hires.
Yes. So, I mean, basically that was, the Krafts basically made Vrabel CEO. They wanted to keep Elliott Wolf on. Vrabel was good with it, and Vrabel has final say. And then he had a relationship with Josh a little bit. Thought it would be good. He thought the development from the quarterback side with Drake May would be good with that whole thing. Defensively, we already talked about the connection to Tennessee, and then I think it's Tom Quinn. Yeah, it's Tom Quinn. I want to say Tony, but it's Tom Quinn who was working under Springer as the assistant special teams coordinator. He worked with Vrabel in Tennessee, and there was that connection there. So everything that Vrabel has done from a coaching standpoint has been his choice. So this has nothing to do, zero to do with the Krafts. Just so people know. I mean, and that is everything I'm saying right now. I know for a very pretty solid source. So.
Can I interject really shortly on this whole thing? The people that are putting that out that it's a Kraft hire,
it's
want something to beat the drum about for weeks Kraft. At a time.
Yeah.
That's all that had to do with those people and not with what's inside the Patriots building. Because do you think Mike Vrabel would have taken the job if the Krafts are going to tell him who his coordinators
chance.
Are going to be? Absolutely not.
0.0.
Exactly.
So, I totally agree with that. Let's just dive in. I guess let's talk about the fresh news, which is the Josh McDaniels stuff. I'm torn, guys, and I want both your takes on it. I am torn. I do like Josh a lot, and I guess I'll start with the negatives first. From my view, the negatives is part of me kind of just wanted a totally fresh, clean start. Totally rip the Band-Aid off. Let's just go all new coaching staff, XYZ. The good part would be that we've seen Josh work really well with quarterbacks. And I know that there are certain people that he's not a good head coach and they're worried about these things. He's not the head coach. He is literally just orchestrating the offense and he has done that really well for, I want to say, was it 14 seasons?
years.
Yeah. So 14 years he's been doing this. I think that there's a lot of good things about it too. I think that him and Drake May can flourish. Some people have had some backlash talking about, Drake May's play style. Look, we've seen Josh McDaniels adapt to almost every single personnel front the Patriots have had in the last decade plus. People forget.
How about Cam Newton?
Yeah. There was elements of RPOs, play action, quarterback options with Cam Newton in 2020. Kind of a weird season, but he showed he could do that. He was in Denver when he had Tebow, and he was going to do that whole thing with him and Noshawn Moreno. Then there was the Mac Jones thing. Now you have Drake May. There's a lot of different elements there. Also, keep in mind that people don't realize that is even a lot of the Patriots. The people that want to go ahead and I think we can all know the kind of people that I'm about to say. All the people that have like the Patriots takes talking bad about it and want to like talk down to them will be the same people who are like, oh, well, Tom Brady, you had Tom Brady running the offense. Okay, how about when they were running the ball with Corey Dillon? Oh, how about when they went to the basically an air raid offense in 2007 and set records? Or how about the 2 tight end offense? How about the Shane Vereen wrinkle of everything? How about, just like X, Y, and Z? Josh has shown time and time again that he can differentiate different type of schemes and work with different type of things. And Mike Vrabel in his press conference said that he was going to lean on what his players could do the best. People were worried about, oh, you're just going to play defense and run the ball. He's like, yeah, I had prime Derrick Henry and we had a good defense. So yeah, that's how we were going to win games. If he had Patrick Mahomes, I think he'd be pretty good with him throwing for 400 yards if they wanted to. My point, I guess, in the long or the short of it is, through my rant, is that Josh McDaniels said he's amenable to different playing styles. Vrabel is too, and it bodes well for Patriots fans. And anyone who says anything otherwise has nothing to say about it aside from agendas.
And going back to McDaniels, he also worked with Jacoby Brissett when he was a rookie.
Correct.
Jimmy G. So he's worked with
Zappy,
a bunch of different style quarterbacks. And, he took his year off and he visited college teams to see what was trending there. And if you saw him on the Games with Names podcast with Julian Edelman,
great clip, by the way. Really good.
Yes. Clip. This was in preseason last year. And he was talking about, what he had seen from Drake May up until that point in training camp. And he was talking about how intriguing working with a player like him, because he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but if you get a quarterback like him, you have to start incorporating some of the running into his offense because he's just going to make it go.
Correct. Russ, your thoughts on this?
Sure. So what's interesting about not just the hire, and we're going to have to wait and see, but I have a feeling, and again, we don't know yet, if the West Coast offense will be gone and the Patriots offense will be back installed. The Earhart-Perkins offense. I'm leaning towards that. We're going to go in that direction, but only time will tell. But regardless, let's say it's going to be that offense. I think Josh McDaniels, with adding additional wrinkles to the running of Drake May, will take Drake May to the next level. This is why I'm thinking it's going to be the offense that the Patriots have run. Because if you think about this, guys, when you look at Drake May, this is a different type of quarterback than Tom Brady, than Jimmy Garoppolo. Mm-hmm. But I think it can be exciting to someone like McDaniels, as you're talking about him talking about it, because he can now incorporate other
he can do everything.
Items. He can do everything, right?
Yep.
But what I think is going to happen, because with the West Coast offense, the quarterback doesn't really call the shots. The coordinator does. I think he's going to give more responsibility
the game has shifted to more of the Kyle Shanahan type of offensive scheme where you have essentially the quarterback who is just like the controller, and you got the coordinator playing Madden. Drake May can do everything, but what people don't. But and I'll give a kind of a random example based off what you just said, Russ. Is Ben Johnson's people talk about Ben Johnson and like this forward-thinking head coach, or head coach potential, coordinator guru. And I really liked Johnson. I wanted Johnson or Vrabel last year before Mayo, but that's a whole different conversation. But what's important to know is Ben Johnson's roots are actually from the Earhart-Perkins system. He's just adapted it to modern times.
Right.
So and McDaniels has been basically, open to changing certain things and adapting certain things too, based on the players. I think it's going to be perfect.
Right. And that's my point, Derek. I'm sorry to intervene again, but please, I just want to go on this point about what I think we're going to be seeing and why I love the hire, because I think when you look at, and it's the greatest quarterback, the greatest player we've ever seen, Tom Brady, playing at the highest level, was not a running quarterback at all. Now you're instilling that into this offense with someone a little bit different, but could be able to run that offense at the line of scrimmage, make the checks, because it puts the power in the hand of the quarterback to make all the decisions. And I think this is a smart guy. I'm talking about Drake May. And now you're adding the element of running into it. I find that very exciting for me. So I think this is really potentially going to be like McDaniels trying something new with a different style of quarterback. I think that's one of the reasons why he wants to do it.
Yeah. I do want to get into the other coordinators, and obviously we will. Before we jump to that gun, Steve, I want your take on this. What's your feeling when we talked about this a little bit on the last show, and I know sometimes I confuse what we talk about on the show and offline, because I think we talk to each other more than our wives, but that's a different conversation. But it's like I guess part of me again is torn about whether you want a fresh start or not. What's your take about having Josh back? I know it is different regimes, but it's someone who's a familiar face, but it's also somebody who is good at his job. But now you have to go ahead, and it's like, are you getting back with your ex? I think there are a lot of people that are kind of torn with that whole thing. What's your take on that?
Well, if you go back to the last year, they had a first-time head coach, and he had first-year coordinators all, with his entire staff. Mm-hmm. And your head coach didn't have anyone to lean on. I think with Vrabel coming to New England, he's dealing with the first-time defensive coordinator, but it's a coach he's worked with very well in the past. And I think hiring McDaniels is part of that reason. Now, I know Vrabel's still going to be involved with the offense, and because he's a hands-on guy with everything. But at the same time, he'd be freer to spend more time with the brand new defensive coordinator and his defensive players, because like Bill Belichick did, he can kind of just say, Josh has that handled, and we don't have to worry about that. And, he's leaning on 14 years of experience as an offensive coordinator, not including the 2 flameouts he had, as a head coach.
Well, and something that you just said, and something that Russ just said not too long ago, kind of intertwined a little bit. I think in a lot of ways it's really cool too that even though Vrabel and McDaniels are familiar faces, I think it's really cool that Vrabel wanted to immerse himself. He got the consultant opportunity, with the Browns. He wanted to immerse himself on the offensive side of the ball, spent a lot of time with the offensive line, tight ends, whatever. Vrabel's always been kind of a front 7 guru going back to his player days, and then at his time with Ohio State, Houston, Tennessee, etc. But then he basically said in a podcast with Will Compton and Taylor Lewan, Busting with the Boys, but he basically said, like, I thought the offensive line time would actually help me understand how to coach defensive line better because I know how to counteract everything. It's why the Patriots apparently are letting Joe Kim go, who's worked for the team for almost 10 years, and he was a basically a grappling, UFC style fighter that was working on hand technique that goes back to the Chandler Jones days,
Yep.
with him and his brother John, who obviously was one of the most prolific UFC fighters of all time. But and I thought that with Josh, he spent a lot of time touring different colleges and spending time in the college game and trying to figure out different schemes and all these. I think these are all really good things and really exciting things. Obviously the proof will be within the pudding. That's to be decided later. But I think both of these guys, even though they are familiar, I think it's both exciting that they've been exploring how to figure out what their own vulnerabilities are. Russ, your take on that?
No, I agree, Derek. And listen, when we talk about what's going to happen moving forward, the fact that you have a head coach that was, like I said, basically a consultant learning the offense, I think is massive. And don't forget the fact that he actually played some offense with the Patriots as a tight end. Okay, so just keep that in mind too. Correct. So he already has that. That's your head coach. Now you have the situation with McDaniels, who's wanting to learn more about the college game. You want a coach that's always looking to evolve his process. And that's what we're seeing from both Vrabel and McDaniels. And like I said, the people that don't like this, that you've already talked about, that are afraid of getting back with their ex, I understand that. But when you look at what has worked over 14 years with McDaniels, and you have a quarterback that has worked so well with so many different quarterbacks, and you're thinking, no, let's not bring him back because we've had him here before. I've heard all the reasons why people don't like the McDaniels deal, and I'm here to say I disagree with all of them because I think this is the right hire for the New England Patriots to move forward. I'm excited. Patriots fans should be excited because you know what you're going to get with Josh McDaniels in this offense now. Did you know what you were going to get last year with Alex Van Pelt? The answer's really did not know. Now you have a known commodity. Why would you not want a known commodity?
And just so you know, I mean, do I think Josh McDaniels is a better coordinator than AVP? I guess so, but I will say this, and Steve and I talked about this. We went into the season last year thinking that DeMarcus Covington was an A+ hire from a defensive coordinator standpoint, and that the year prior that the defensive line was the best coached position group on the team. Him and Mayo fumbled the ball, and AVP I had a lot of questions about. And honestly, I was really sad that AVP was going to go because I thought he did a really good job with Drake. Now, do I know that it was a direct correlation? No, I don't. I have no idea. For all I know, it was Ben friggin' McAdoo. But I have no idea. But I know two things. I know people were worried about where Drake was going to be at a development standpoint. They were worried about footwork. Milton, kind of a similar way.
Yep.
And both had improvements, throughout the year. We saw them at least play kind of above the rim, quote unquote, to use a different sports term, but they kind of both came above the rim there, and I give AVP a lot of credit. I would have loved, even if Josh was the coordinator, it would have been nice to see him return, but that's just me. I don't know where you guys feel on that, but
yeah, it would have been. I think it would have been nice to see AVP return in some fashion,
like as a quarterback coach, passing game coordinator, however you want to classify it.
Yeah,
like
offensive consultant, right?
Yeah,
like Vrabel was.
I guess he still technically could,
right,
but it's probably unlikely.
But again, one of the other things about Josh is because he did flame out in 2 head coaching gigs, we really don't see anybody. Well, Russ, Derek, and I talked about this at length. We didn't see anybody giving Josh another shot at a head coach anytime soon, if ever.
Right.
So
I agree with that, Steve.
And when you go after some young new guy who's got some, great skills at running offenses, the problem is if your offense is is as successful as
Right.
you wish it to be, then that guy usually is out the door in 2 to 3 years with a head coaching gig on his own.
Right.
If everything works out with Josh this time around with Vrabel, he's not going anywhere.
Right. And I'm glad that you said that, Steve, because unfortunately for me, I have been listening to podcasts and watching things over the past 24 hours. And a lot of what I've heard to basically counteract what you just said is, well, if he's doing well, then he'll get another job. And that means that the offense is well. So it's okay if he leaves in 2 years. I call bull crap on that. I want someone that's going to be there for a while. And there's no way that this guy is going away. Plus, he's from the area. He lives here. So he's more apt to stay after 2 failed head coaching jobs. And being a head coach and being a coordinator is completely different. So for me, I have a feeling he's learned what his role is, and it is an offensive coordinator. And I think he's exceptional at it. I have nothing against what you guys said about Alex Van Pelt, okay? You guys could be completely right. I just think that McDaniels is at a different level when it comes to coordinators. I think he's at the top of the heap, along with some of the brightest minds doing the game. But because of these situations where he flamed out as head coaches, people look at him differently.
Yeah.
They should look at him and judge him as an offensive coordinator, which is at a high level, Derek.
No, 100%.
All right.
Totally.
Well,
Totally
I
with you.
think we should probably move on now.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Why don't we take a break real quick for podcast purposes? When we come back, we're going to jump into the Patriots hiring of the defensive coordinator and special teams. All right, we're back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Havens, Russ Goldman, Steve Ballsjerry spent the first top of the show talking about, Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels. We're going to jump into the defensive side now. Steve, why don't you jump in first? Patriots thought on is it Terrell? Is it Terrell Williams?
Mhm.
Yeah, I wanted to say Tyrell for some reason. Terrell Williams is the defensive coordinator, former defensive line coach for the Detroit Lions. There was some connection there with Mike Vrabel. If you want to give us any background, with your thoughts on the hire.
Yeah, I think this is another good hire. I mean, Vrabel now, he knew Josh McDaniels, but Josh didn't coach him when he was with New England. Maybe, just on some of those exotic packages where, he caught 11 touchdowns and Super Bowls. But this is a totally different kind of relationship. Williams worked with Vrabel in Tennessee. He was the defensive line coach for 6 years, under Vrabel. And then in his last year, Vrabel thought enough of him to give him the title of assistant head coach. So that tells you the trust factor that's there. You look at the job he did with the Lions. I saw a clip, I think it was last night or maybe it was early this morning, from Trey Hendrickson about, not Trey Hendrickson, I'm drawing a blank now. I discombobulated myself, from one of the Lions guys, and he was talking about how simple and easy it was to be coached by Williams, and he said all he's looking for is violent people. And
that's the message that Vrabel said multiple times too. It was physical, it was violent, and they wanted to go ahead and look. Vrabel's going to go ahead and build through the trenches, but the Patriots desperately need help in. And I think it's going to be a huge forefront. I think I know a lot of people are talking about T. Higgins and other things, and I know this is a slight digression, and we don't have to go down this path right now, but I think the Patriots are going to throw a crap ton of money at linemen on both sides. I think it's going to be a whole different scheme. So that will be, whatever conversation. But I totally agree with you, Steve.
Yeah, and look, the bottom line with him is just like, he's going to be a first-time coordinator, but that's okay because his head coach has been in his shoes. I think this is a good hire for a couple of different things, a couple of different reasons. One is, he's talking about wanting violent people. That means they're not going to be in the quote unquote read and react mode. This means they're going to come after people. For guys like Keon White and guys like Christian Barmore, which we hope he's going to be healthy, when the season's coming. I think these are the type of players they're going to be, much happier because they're going to get a chance to tee off and play to their strengths. And I think this is going to be a very, very good defense. You look at the job he did, in Tennessee. You look at the job he did in excuse me, in Detroit, and he's going to be just fine. I think this defense, they needed this.
Yeah. What about you, Russ? What are your thoughts?
I'm glad that Steve mentioned this, because I heard and saw the comment about violence, that's what he expects from his players. And Steve and I have been talking about an aggressive defense for, 10, 15 years, maybe. So I think we're going to get that. I don't think this is going to be the Patriots read and react defense. So people talk about, well, we don't have any change. I think you're going to have a significant change defensively.
Oh, it's going to be very, very different. 100%.
Just because Vrabel played in the Patriots offense doesn't mean that you're running the read and react defense. Yep. I'm sorry. There's a Goldman for you. We wouldn't have a show without a Goldman. But I'm just saying that this is going to be an aggressive, get after the quarterback type of defense. I've wanted it for a long time. So for me, everything that I've heard about this coach, if you see the comments coming from Detroit, they're devastated that he's leaving. That should tell you everything you need to know about this coach coming in. Now, we could talk about this. When you look at the coordinators and you look at Vrabel, just the three of them, this guy was raised to an assistant head coach. So you have someone that has been raised to potentially be a head coach, okay? So you have that in this Terrell Williams. You have Josh, who was a head coach. Now you have Vrabel. You have minds that will think like a head coach, but in the case of coordinators, also be a coordinator. So for me, you have a lot of brain trust now at the top of your coaching tree right here. You've got the head coach and the coordinators. And of course, we also like the situation with the special teams coordinator. This staff already is looking completely different from the staff from last season. For me, we're going to talk about, you guys will talk a lot about players coming in, and Derek, you should be talking about players coming on both lines, because I agree with you on that.
Yep.
But you have to have the coaching to be able to teach the players coming in, and I think they're going to have the staff. Now you bring the players in to build the actual team, but you needed the coaching staff. Now
whole thing. Sorry to cut you off. My whole thing was just essentially that it's going to be different. Even though it is Josh, I think offensively, defensively, they're going to be different than what we've been accustomed to. And I do think that with Vrabel wanting essentially to really build through those trenches, I do think that we're going to see a pretty stark turnover. Like I was going to kind of surprise you as, Russ, I know Steve and I have been doing this, the two of us, for a while now, and yep. Steve knows usually once a show I like to throw a random question with no thought, with no thought behind it. And I won't do this to you guys right now unless you feel like you want to answer. But
go ahead,
I honestly think that there's a really good chance that we have more than 50% roster turnover from this team from this year to next year because of scheme and what kind of the identity wants to be. And for example, like I know the Crafts the Crafts are, they didn't want to have to get rid of Mayo, and I don't think Mayo is necessarily a bad guy, but it was just handled wrong. And a lot of the players speaking out, I think, kind of ultimately forced their hands. Right. I know that Vrabel's not going to stand for that BS. I know that's not going to fly. So what's going to be the determining factor? I think the determining factor is bringing all new coaches, new systems, new schemes, new philosophies. What's 3-4 or 4-3? Oh, you mean the defense?
Yeah, the front. Yeah, Todd asked if we think they'll run a 3-4 or 4-3.
I think more 4-3, but I don't
I
know for
think the
sure.
base defense would probably be more for 4-3 this year.
That's
but
what I think.
I wouldn't doubt that at times they'll, drop into a 3-4.
I think it's going to be kind of interesting because if you look at the Titans, and again, I'm not saying that it has to be like a duplicate copy, but like look at Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat as your tackles, and then your edge rushers like Harold Landry out of obviously Boston College.
Yeah.
Like Harold Landry was like 240 pounds coming out of college. But like, and yeah, I mean, Jeffrey Simmons is kind of a freak, I want to say he came out of Ole Miss or something like that. And he's kind of got a pretty traditional, like newer age body style for DT. But like Tavondre Sweat coming out of Texas last year was what, Steve? Like 360 pounds? Like he's a friggin' tank. So I could see them getting beefier and a little bit more physical and whatever in the middle, and then getting a little bit, off the edge, which is why I've been saying for a while that I'm starting to think that they're going to redo the middle of the line. And I could see them signing Josh Sweat, who's a free agent from the Eagles, and I could see them signing or drafting Abdul Carter and not an offensive tackle in the first round, and start building some speed and some freakish athleticism off the edges, because I think that Vrabel's ultimately going to want to build his teams that way. But that's just that's a total guess.
Another name to keep an eye on, who's a free agent, and he's a big defensive lineman, Levi, and I know I'm going to butcher his last name, Onwuzurike, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Yeah,
he had he had 47 pressures last year, and might he follow Williams to New England?
Yep, potentially.
It's worth pondering, right?
As far as special teams go, I mean, we can obviously dive back into whatever subject you guys want to do as we kind of go through this. But as far as special teams go, I really did think that bringing Springer back was a good call. I definitely think they will. I have a feeling, as a hunch, I have a feeling they're going to bring in another kicker for competition, but they might leave a veteran there to go ahead and do whatever. But I think Behringer's been kind of up and down. But I do think special teams wise, I thought it was a good call to bring Springer back. Any thoughts on the special teams? Russ, I'll start with you first.
No, I'm like I said, Derek, I'm fine with bringing back who they had as special teams coordinator, and then of course I'm fine with the kicking situation. I really am. I'm fine with that. That's just me, but we'll see what they end up doing. I do want to circle back to your topic about the roster maybe having 50% turnover.
Yeah.
So I think it might even be more than that. And the reason why I'm saying that is that if you look at the history, and you can't always go by history, if you look at even going all the way back, and Steve will remember this, from Parcells to Belichick, maybe not as much with Pete, there was a huge turnover because that first year under a new coach, it was kind of like see what player sticks. And then in year two was the team that you were really building around.
The number that I had heard from a friend who's in the Boston sports media.
Yep.
And I'm not going to share their name because it's really not important. And it's just an opinion. It's not like it's an informed whatever.
Sure.
Time will tell. The number that he threw out was he thinks there'll be about 20 people who they're going to keep. And so it's going to be, call it anywhere between 30 and 40 of a total flip. That was his call.
Yeah, I can believe that.
I can kind of see that.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And honestly, Derek, I think they need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's okay to turn this whole roster over. Again, like we were talking about, we've been talking about this rebuild like for 4 or 5 years. Well, now you have the quarterback from last season. Now
you're talking about guys like Jonathan Jones and Dietrich Wise.
Yeah.
You have your Keon White comments. Okay, that's disappointing and maybe a little upsetting or whatever. There's kind of a little way to kind of unpack that we could talk about if we wanted to go down that road. We're not going to right now, but like, okay, you have your Keon Whites, whatever. You have guys that have been in the building for years, and you have your Jonathan Jones and your Dietrich Wises who are captains, or even if they're not captains, are very well thought of and highly regarded by the players and coaching staff. When you got guys like that making comments, you need to go ahead and flip it. And that's why
I agree.
fired, in my opinion. It was that whole
right.
Again, that's just my take. That's
right.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
No, listen, the way that I'm looking at it, then maybe Steve can chime in talking about the roster. I think that Vrabel has to talk to all of these players and make a decision on each one of them. Which ones he wants to build around, and then the others got to go. That's the way I'm looking at it. Like you said, that's the way I'm thinking. That's the way this is going to go. So players that aren't going to be part of the mix, that don't really want to be part of the mix, and he'll know it by talking to them, they need to go.
Yeah, those who've listened to the show since we've had it probably are freaking out, because I'm kind of freaking out, because Russ and I could not be more aligned, which makes me feel like I need to change my mindset, because
no,
but here we are. So Steve, you tell us.
For 14 years, you guys haven't agreed on very much.
No, we're agreeing tonight.
No, it's very unfortunate, and I guess fun at the same time. Steve, give us your thoughts, please. Please save us from this insanity.
Well, first, Chris had a comment, and I think this is a good point. The roster lost a lot of leadership through retirement/injuries. These kids need teaching. I think that is very true. They lost a lot of, in the last couple of years, they lost a lot of their core leadership guys. And, some of the younger guys in this generation of the team have taken over, but at the same time, you still need to hold on to some of that veteran leadership from guys who were around. And again, like Derek said, I think Vrabel's going to have to sit down and talk to the players and get a feel for, where their heads are at first.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, this is going to be a different football team. They're going to have a different philosophy. And some of these guys, they may even be good players still, but they're not going to be a fit for what he wants to do. So This is something Elliot Wolf, and his coordinators will have to, they're going to have to do a deep dive on the roster and say, these are going to be our core guys. These are going to be the guys we're going to build around. And then we need to talk about, of the other players, which ones we're keeping.
I think the really hard part about all this, and what is kind of hard to separate different lanes and channels, is that, for one, this isn't a good football team. Like, put the coaching staff aside. They got really old. Brady left, and they were trying to rebuild, and they've been trying to, and they've had problems with drafts, signings, etc. Now they have basically, they have to keep changing the leaf of coaching staff and coordinators. They have zero stability, and they're all compounding issues. Like they really are. I mean, they're going to be. This is the fifth now defensive or offensive coordinator in the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. They've had literally a new offensive coordinator every single year. So even though the language is relatively the same, you're still going to have issues with just that. And they're trying to develop a new quarterback, move on from the shadow of Bill and Tom and everything else. I mean, they're it's not like the quote unquote dirty little secret of the entire thing, but that is a factor, even if you don't want to acknowledge it. The biggest factor is they don't have enough talent. They don't have really good players because they've drafted and developed shit, to be honest. I mean, that's what it is. They haven't done it well.
Well, Miguel's going to be after you.
I know, Miguel. I know. It's the second one today. I'm sorry. I'm just telling you. Unfortunately, that's what it was.
But
so,
and they. I mean, look. Anyone who was following Bill Belichick was going to suffer by comparison. We all know that.
But we also know that wasn't also the only thing. It wasn't just they were in their shadow. It was also they just weren't performing good enough.
Right. But now we're one coach removed from that, and Vrabel's his own guy, and Vrabel's going to build this team in his image, and I don't think that's a bad way to go because, Vrabel said in an interview the best compliment that he ever got from an opposing head coach was, "Your team plays its ass off." And that's the kind of mentality he's bringing,
Yep.
And he's going to expect that from everyone. And I think this team is, it's going to look a lot different offensively, defensively. Special teams probably be close to the same since Jeremy Springer's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But they did, they made a remarkable turnaround themselves last year. They weren't great, but when you consider they were the bottom of the league the year before, which was unheard of in 25 years with, the last 25 years with the Patriots. Now they've got, a good coordinator there. Brendan Schooler's coming back. Their punter just needs to be a little bit more consistent, but I mean, he can boom it out of the stadium when he's on top of his game. So, I think that, look, it's a lot of what we're talking about right now is going to depend on what kind of a spring they have, because now they need to sit down, all the coordinators, the coach, and Wolf and his staff, and decide, okay, where do we go from here? How do we start, rebuilding this team? And that's, they're going to have to hit big time in free agency. They have plenty of money to do that. And they're going to have to hit in the draft this year. And if they're able to do that, then, this rebuild will go along a lot faster now that they have the quarterback.
I think they're going to be down in Mobile and the Shrine Bowl. I think they're going to be – I think there's going to be a lot of rumors. And this is a total guess. I think there's going to be a lot of, kind of whispers – scuttlebutt, or whatever you want to classify it, of them definitely trying to kind of turn as many leaves as they can over this offseason. It'll be very interesting. Chris writes in, any thoughts on potential position coaches? I'm curious to see if there's any connections that Josh made when he was doing his college time, with anybody new. I am very curious about that. Obviously, Vrabel will have his choices. Obviously, if he, had Williams and McDaniels in, Springer, I think the special teams pretty much is going to be status quo if I had to guess. But I would be surprised if there was much there where offensive defense, I think it's be different. But any thoughts on that from you guys?
Well, I know you mentioned in several telephone conversations that we had that you wanted to see Mike Pellegrino stay.
Oh, for defense, yeah. I'd love to see Pellegrino stay. I think he's a really good defensive backs coach. I think the Patriots have done a really good job, and I honestly don't know if it's Bill, if it was a Bill Belichick thing, if it was just something that he was seeing in traits that he was able to kind of develop and find these diamonds in the rough. He did it a lot. But I also always thought I always thought the defensive backs had good techniques. I thought you saw it with Isaiah Bolden and Alex Austin and like certain things too, where they're putting their hands between the opposing receiver's arms and breaking the ball up and little things. So I really would like to see Pellegrino back. I just have no idea if that's going to happen or not.
You're right.
Russ,
and speaking of Pellegrino and the defensive backs, Christian Gonzalez must love hearing that they're going to be aggressive, because means
he's going to get more picks.
Yeah. That means he's not going to have to cover for 6 seconds,
which you can, thankfully.
Yeah, Derek, I don't really have many thoughts about the positional coaches because I really, again, haven't really studied them enough. So I'm just being honest.
Okay, so forget even that. So I was going to ask you guys, we've talked about all three phases.
Yep.
Is there something overlaying that, we can wrap this up here in a couple minutes. So
sure.
Is there something overlaying that you feel like we missed or that you wanted to bring up specifically in any phase?
So to be honest with you, Derek, I think we hit everything. The only thing that I'm going to bring it up. Okay. The only thing that we have not talked about, we
go.
talked about this off air, but we're going to talk. I'm just going to mention it right now.
Okay.
We don't have enough information to talk about the situation with, I'm sorry, what was her name? Is it Robin Glazer?
Robin Glazer.
Yeah, Robin
Right.
Glazer.
Robin Glazer. Sorry about that. We don't have enough information to
Correct.
know exactly what her role was. All we know is that she did move over to football operations. This is all I want to say about that. Again, I don't know enough, but
Yep.
I think for me, I don't think that she was fired. I think that she resigned partially because it's a new regime coming in, a new coaching staff, a new way of doing things, and she probably just wanted to step aside. With that said, all I thought about was that the Glazer resigning says to me, even in more full force, that it's Vrabel's team. That's what it says to me.
So my take on it, and again, I want to preface it by saying the same thing that Russ did. I don't know enough about it, so I don't want to go ahead and cast any stones. My feeling was, and I see where you're coming from. My feeling about the Glazer situation was that there were some rumblings going on that when people were interviewing for the head coaching position and doing this, that some of the meetings were conducted like weirdly. I know that's a really poor adjective, really widespread net, whatever. And again, I'm not saying I know this is not a known thing or not known thing. That's why I was kind of on the fence about talking about it in general.
Sure.
It seemed like things were like there were a lot of people like questioning like how they were going about their search, whatever. She's had a connection to the Crafts for a long time. My thing about her resigning versus being fired is because I feel like, and this is a really dangerous road to go down, is because I think the Patriots got a lot of backlash for firing a first-time head coach, moving on from Tom. There was the Kraft family situation. There was the there was the whole Rooney Rule situation with Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich, and so like. They were getting some heat because they put both of those guys in a tweet, on the same exact thing. They didn't even get separate tweets. I know Felger was beating that drum all last week and this, that, and the other thing. And now they're firing a woman. And so now it's like, okay, well, not only are they racist, but they're sexist too. Like, again, I could probably word this a whole different way. And I'm not even
Derek, it's okay.
But I am tiptoeing around it because I do think that I can understand why certain people would feel that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of those things are true or not. I just feel like they have been under a lot of heat. They mean the Crafts and the Patriots. So they were just like, you know what? Let's just do it a different way.
Okay.
That's how I kind of feel.
Derek, I'm going to let you off the hook by saying something else controversial.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
So
Great.
so you're off the hook because I'm going to talk. I'm going to share this, and I'm going to mention this that and I've not done this in years.
Mm-hmm.
I actually I called into WEI today. Okay. I spoke to Adam Jones, and Steve's eyes are going to roll in the back.
You're doing a really good job of not listening to those shows, but
I know. But I
already did roll my eyes.
Yes,
I'm rolling them right now.
Yes, but I mentioned this to Adam Jones and Rich Keefe, and I'm going to share what I had said. Robert Kraft should not be running the New England Patriots. He graduated high school with my mother. She's 83 years old, and I'm sorry, this is going to be controversial, but someone of that age should not be running the New England Patriots. Jonathan needs to be running the New England Patriots at this point. End of story. So that's
ageist.
Now I'm an
ageist,
ageist.
Sexist, racist. We're really just circling all the boxes here. This thing's never gonna end.
Derek, I wanted to let you off the hook by throwing that out there.
No, I know. And again, I know I didn't say anything mean, and
You didn't.
This is just me being like, man, I just wonder if they just feel like they need to just reset and they're just trying to not get themselves in any more trouble because they were getting friggin' national heat in some of these shows.
Sorry, I have to share that. Oh, of course,
Russ is
run away.
No, I keep putting it up and you keep taking it down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing over here.
Okay. And
But,
Chris,
but anyway,
before we go, I got a comment for you, Chris.
Okay, but well, anyways, the last thing I would say is that, again, I'm not saying that I don't know that one way or the other. I just have a feeling, paying attention to the team as much as I do, if there is some kind of underlying current with some of those stuff. But we don't know any of those answers. I have no idea, and I'm sure Robin Glazer's a phenomenal woman. I have nothing against her. I've never met her. I'm not saying she did anything wrong. I'm just wondering if there was any kind of connection, and if they just want to turn a new leaf, basically, organizationally, you know, which is kind of why I was kind of a tiny bit surprised that maybe they wanted to even have Josh back. And I know Josh had literally zero to do with anything. I just wondered if they wanted to literally just flip everything and just kind of move on and whatever. But again, Russ, before we do final thoughts, and I know you have a comment for Chris, Steve, final thoughts for you. Any other comment that you want to share?
Yeah, well, again, I mean, Robin Glazer spent 18 years with the team. So
with the Kraft specifically. Yeah, I mean, they've been together for a long time.
But yeah, she was more of a business person. And then last year they made her an advisor to Gerard Mayo, which I never really got what that was about. Eventually, someday that'll probably come out. But, with Vrabel, I mean, look, I think that the team's headed back in the right direction now. And, he brought in his own Ernie Adams, which we didn't mention. So
Stretch. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I forget his real name. I can find it.
I think it's Stretcher or Striker. But
no, it was Stretch is the nickname, but I have no idea what his real name is. I'll find it out.
Yeah, it's John. Stryker,
I will find it while you're talking.
Okay.
But and he also brought in his strength and conditioning guy from Tennessee. So John Stryker. So anyway, I just think the team is headed back in the right direction now. But again, they're still going to have a lot of hits in this spring if they want to see results right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. And by the way, with Glazer too, there was something I was going to say. I was going to make one more comment just for my own final thoughts. I guess I'll try to remember in a second. Russ, why don't you go ahead and leapfrog me? Final thoughts on anything you else want?
Sure. Well, I'm just going to share this. Derek, you are not a sexist, but I am an ageist, so we'll just leave it there, okay? So
that's fine. I think you're both old and dumb, but we can have that conversation offline.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, it's now it sounds mean if you don't laugh. It's a joke. Okay.
No, I know it's a
joke.
I'm
for like 20 years.
I'm going to tell I'm going to tell our buddy who's always listening, cover your ears, kiss my ass, Derek.
Fair enough. Miguel, right. I said I'm sorry. It was twice. That was one for Steve. Okay.
Okay. So I'll give you my final thoughts quickly, Derek. And listen, I want to thank you guys for having me back on. It's been a long time. I've enjoyed doing the show with you guys. Unfortunately, just because of my schedule, I can't do it often, but I wanted just to come on to share my views. I'm excited. I think my final thoughts is, after several years of heading in the wrong direction, I think finally heading in the right direction. So I'm excited about that. So that's where I'm coming from. The hiring of Vrabel changed a lot for me. I think they're going to turn over the roster, like you and I were talking about, Derek, big time. And I like both of these coordinators, and I like that they kept the other coordinator as well. I think things are heading in the right direction. Before I go, I do want to mention that our friend Chris watches my show, Cottage Talk, all the time. And I said I wouldn't mention Marco. Oh, sorry. I mentioned Marco Silva once, Chris. Sorry about that. But I want to mention this. We're going to beat Liverpool at Craven Cottage this year. We're going to be the only team to beat Liverpool. Suck it, Chris. Okay. Now
all right. So now you're happy. I literally only know what like half that means. So
I know it's okay.
I love you, Chris. What I was going to say about Robin Glazer was what I was going to say to end the show is part of the reason I feel like they moved Robin Glazer into the role as it is, because she has been with the Crafts for a long time, is because Bill had such a large had such a large presence and role in the organization that they had to go ahead and need a lot of people to go ahead and fill his shoes, so to speak. So I thought that maybe they moved her over to this role. Even I'm not sure if it was planned or not planned, or they gave all the the chips to Vrabel and said, "Hey, it's your choice." But I think that when they moved on from Bill, they were like, "Hey, Robin, we trust you. Maybe you could help, lift a little weight, in whatever role, that they had discussed." So that was just my thing. I guess I know we've done final thoughts for like an hour, but and that's usually not our style. I will say that interesting about the Bears hiring Ben Johnson. I'm really curious to see how that works out with Caleb Williams. Obviously, there were some connections with Ben Johnson and the Patriots. I do love the Aaron Glenn hiring for the Jets. I think he's very highly regarded. It will be very interesting to see, how that whole thing plays out, and kind of go from there. Anyone else have anything else to say before we wrap up? Or are we good to go?
Two quick things. I think Williams would have been Detroit's first choice for a defensive coordinator to remain there. And the other, since the three of us are together and we're beginning what will be our 14th season on Patriots 4th and 2, a big shout out to our old co-host, Damien, who is now a U.S. citizen.
Wow.
Damien.
Oh, awesome. Damien, I hope you're listening, man. Love you, brother. I love to see Damien every once in a while. We haven't got together in a couple of years, but that's awesome for him.
Derek, can I do one final shout out, because I don't know the next time we'll
go ahead now. But if you bring up Liverpool, I'm cutting you off.
No, I'm not bringing up Liverpool. I want to mention this because I saw him before we started to do the show. I want to give a shout out to my son Brady, who listened to many of our episodes and actually co-hosted a few with us. He is now doing play-by-play for Walpole High School basketball games. He did the Walpole High School football games, and he did play-by-play and color in the football, but he's doing a lot of play-by-play. That's awesome. And awesome. It is just great to see my son do that. So it's a little shout out to Brady.
No, I'm glad you brought that up.
Might get Wally pipped.
Yeah, that's true. He might. Yeah, let's hope so. We'll get a ton. We'll get a ton of insight. So, but anyways, I want to thank everyone who's listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. Russ, Steve, me, Derek. Always good to see you guys, talk to you about everything. We'll be back next week as always, unless there's any breaking news. Please do subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. And if you can share, and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, it keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. And we are all presented by PatsFans.com, and we'll see you guys next week.